First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Bracha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Revelation, the 13th chapter. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So at this point, John, right, which is on that island of Patmos, he's describing as he's seeing this vision. It looks like the body of water next to him. He's seeing this beast rise up, like this terrifying looking beast rise up out of the sea, which had 7 heads and 10 horns. And in the, I believe it was in the 12th chapter or the 11th chapter, it might have been the 12th. He went into that, right? The 7 heads and the 10 horns. And upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Which the 7 heads and 10 horns, these were the heads were really like nations that were put like assimilated together in the forming of the pagan Roman Empire. Okay, and when you go into the history of Rome, it basically grew from a city and started conquering different nations around and assimilating them as part of the empire. And the names of the 7 heads are the Greeks, the Rome itself, Spanish, all right, which in the ancient world it was known as Hispania, that region, in the region of Gauls, which is the French. And then you had Germania Major, Germania Minor, and not Hispania, Britannia, which later in modern times came to be known as Britain, or the British. Okay, so in the ancient world, that was their ancient names, but it's the same bodies that have been put together today in the revival, right? That second beast, which has come in the order, the likeness, and the power of the first beast, just called by different names. Like how the Edomites reigned as the Greeks, but then again they also came and reigned as the Romans, and it's still the same Edomites. They just go by a different name or covering. So in the ancient world, the Roman Empire, the pagan Roman Empire, was the power structure of Esau. But today it is known collectively as NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and the 10 horns are the European Union, right? Together, that forms the modern day beast. But in terms of the nation of people of which this power structure belongs, it's still the same people, which are the Edomites. Okay, so it says here in 10 horns, which are the ancient names of those 10 horns, right? Going back to the the Germanic tribes, which eventually, as we went into in the, I believe it might have been the previous chapter, dealing with the, or the 11th chapter, or the 12th, can't remember exactly which ones, but dealing with the 10 horns, which became an extension of the Roman Empire, but they were within the empire. Okay, they were more like vassal states. So you had the Vandals, Alemanni, Lombards, Heruli, Anglo-Saxons, Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Suebi, Burgundians, and the Franks. And these make up the 10 horns. And that was their ancient name. And in the modern, in the modern world or today's society, as they were formed into the European Union, the original flag had, I believe, about 12 stars. But in actuality, when you look at it, 4 of those stars really should be 2, because the stars represented the nations that were a part of the EU at the time. And you had you had Belgium, France, Luxembourg, Germany, Netherlands, and then you had UK and Ireland. But really, they're part of the same body, right? That should be 1. So those are 2 stars that really should be combined into 1. And then you had Spain and Portugal, which is likewise, a similar predicament right there. It's really part of one body. In the ancient world, Hispania wasn't broken up like that. And then Denmark, Italy, Greece. So these were the 10 horns. Of course, they've added more nations now, but that's their modern counterpart. Okay. It says here, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his name or his heads the name of blasphemy. And the 10 crowns upon the horns just symbolize dominion, right? They had power to rule, right, as part of the Roman Empire. And upon the heads the name of blasphemy, which when you go into that word blasphemy, it's it also goes into like injurious speech, and that's why they were known as the pagan Roman Empire. Slander, detraction, speech injurious to another's good name, impious and reproachful speech injurious to divine majesty. So when you look at the way they live their lives, right, they deify themselves. In fact, they had something called emperor worship in Rome. The Roman imperial the Roman imperial cult is what it was known as. Was a state-sanctioned political religious system that honored emperors and their families, often deifying them after death. When you deify somebody, you make them a god. After death, to foster unity, loyalty, and divine authority across the empire. Originating under Augustus, a combined Hellenistic ruler worship with Roman traditions, often focusing on emperor's genius, which is their spirit, rather than direct worship of a living person. So once the person died, then they would deify them, right? So that now that they're dead, they would reverence them as a god. So these were things that they were doing back then. All right, that's an example of the blasphemy. Not to mention the many of the other things that they're guilty of. It says, "And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard," and verse 2 describes really the body, right, which is the beginning and the end, right, from the beginning of the beast to its end. So it says here, the beast I saw was like unto a leopard, and that was the beginning of their power or their reign. The leopard goes back to the Greeks, okay, starting with Alexander the Greek, which began the major kingdoms or the dominion of Esau, Edom on earth, right, as the Greeks. And then you had the Romans, and then eventually, right, as time goes on, you have the second leg of the Roman Empire. But let's go to that real quick in the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter. And here Daniel sees a vision of different beasts which represent different world empires that would come up into power and reign for a period of time. And so dealing with the second, the third beast, which is the Grecian Empire, it says, "After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl." Now this leopard represented the Grecian Empire and the 4 wings, which is also synonymous with the 4 heads. And the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. When you go into the history of the Greek Empire, Alexander, after having conquered, so much of the known world, eventually died. Now, his kingdom was divided amongst his generals, which there were more than 4 of them. But through the wars, they had wars amongst each other to try and amass more territory. And those are known as the Wars of the Diadochi. Through those wars, you had the prominent 4 that were left standing, upon which the bulk of his empire was divided amongst. They are the 4 wings or the 4 heads that were upon the back of this leopard, or upon its head. And those were Ptolemy the first Soter, Lysimachus, Cassander, and Seleucus the first Nicator. All right, so continuing back here, so that was the beginning of the beast, right? Esau's power structure, and his feet were like the feet of a bear. Now here it uses symbols. Okay, the scriptures are very symbolic. It uses symbols, and these symbols represent different nations, right? So the bear is in reference to the Russians, and that's their symbol, right? They had it for a long period of time. See the Russian emblem of a bear. It says the bear is a widespread non-official symbol of Russia representing strength and wilderness, often used in Western caricature since the 16th century. Um, okay, so it says here, while the official emblem is a double-headed, yeah, that's fine. So it says here, the Russian bear. The Russian bear is a widespread symbol for Russia. Now, it may not be what they may have officially, set for themselves, but it's how the world represents them. Okay, so it says here, used in cartoons, articles, and dramatic plays since as early as the 16th century. See, so that's symbolic, right? When they represented them in, as it says, cartoons or articles, they would represent them as the bear. And that wasn't by coincidence, because of all animals, why the bear? So when it mentions here the feet of this beast was as the feet of a bear, once again, Russia was not a part of the beast. It's not a part of the beast. So why is it mentioned as the feet of the beast? Because when you go from the head or head to toe, right, like the saying goes, you start from the head and you come down to the toes, right? When you look at Daniel, the 2nd chapter, the dream Nebuchadnezzar had, the timeline started from the head and went down to the toes. So that statue, which represented the different empires that would reign in the world, was in succession of time, one that would reign after the other. And when you started with the head and then the midsection, the arms, and then the legs, and then the toes, eventually the stone came and broke down those toes, right? Likewise here, the bear is likened as the feet, because the bear, being Russia, is what's going to bring about the end of the beast in this Third World War. Okay, so that's why Russia is likened as the feet, or the ending of this bear, of this beast, because they're going to be a part of, one of the main portions or adversaries that will be used to come against this beast power structure in the last days. And his mouth as the mouth of a lion, which the lion represents Great Britain, or for the period of time that they came and they ruled, and that was their symbol as well, the lion. Let's type that in here. The emblem of Britain, lion. Right, it says here, the lion is the primary national emblem of England, representing courage, strength, and royalty, dating back to the 12th century. The emblem consists of 3 gold lions, or quote, quote, leopards in heraldic terms, but it's really lions, on a red background. Established by Richard the Lionheart, Richard I, it appears in royal arms on national team kits and symbolizes the British monarchy. See that? Which was rule, right? Sole rule. So the lion represents here Britain. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Okay, and so the power of this beast, which in in their in the ancient time, we know once again was a pagan Roman Empire, which got its power from Rome, right, itself. Now, as the beast revived, once again, they still draw their power from the ancient pagan Roman Empire. This new beast system was established upon the principles of the Roman Empire. That's why there's a lot of similarities between Rome, or let me say America today, which is the heart of this modern day beast system, and ancient Rome, which was the heart of the ancient beast system. Okay. It says, and his seat and great authority. And you can also look up the Treaty of Rome, which was, let me actually type that in here and see what we get. Treaty of Rome. It's not by coincidence that, Roman numerals are used here, right? Certain Latin terms. If you deal with exercising or bodybuilding or whatnot, a lot of those terms that you use, they're Latin. Okay, latissimus dorsi and your gluteus maximus and all that. What language is gluteus maximus? Is a term from Latin, right? The Capitol Hill, okay, your coliseums, your stadiums, your theaters, amphitheaters, all of these things go back to the time of the Roman Empire. Even your holy days and all of those, they go back to the Roman Empire. So it's literally a system built on the blueprints from the Roman Empire. Treaty of Rome signed on March 25th, 1957 by 6 European nations. The Treaty of Rome established the European Economic Community, which is a part of the beast, creating a common market and customs union. Its purpose was to promote peace, which really is the contrary, economic prosperity, and ever closer union through the free movement of goods, people, services, and capital. Okay. So, going back to Revelation chapter 13, verse now in verse 3. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death. So you had 7 heads, right? And it says here, I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wandered after the beast. The head that was wounded unto death was Rome. Okay? Because eventually you had, remember, the pagan Roman Empire, it lasted for a while, but then they had a transition period. Okay, but you had the end of the rulership of the Edomites, okay, as the Romans, which ended with what's this guy's name, Domitian. And Second Esdras, the 11th and 12th chapters go into that. That's why there were 12 feathers. Okay, when you go into Second Esdras, it ends with Domitian, but the Roman Empire didn't end with Domitian. Okay, but it was the stopping or the ending or the interruption of Esau's rule as the Romans. And then, you had Nerva and, the Nerva Antonine, dynasty and so on, and then so on and so forth. And then eventually you had the full transition of Israelites that were now the primary rulers of the Roman Empire, which later came to be known as the Holy Roman Empire. Okay. So at one point, the Edomite rulership of Rome was stopped, but it was only for a period of time. So eventually that deadly wound, which was them being taken out of power, that's also in Revelation, the 20th chapter, was healed. Because for a period of time, they were now, not only were they taken out of power, they were actually subjected, right? The Lord slapped a seal of subjection upon them, and they were subject unto us, not able to rise up or usurp authority against us for that period of time until they were healed. And that was during the Renaissance era, also known as the rebirth, which was them, the Edomites, coming back up into power, as they started to take down the Moors and basically take over everything that Jake had set up. Jake referring to the Israelites, and all the world wandered after the beast, because now this beast had come back into power. Okay, so after they had gone down, they suffered that period of 1,000 years, under servitude. And then I'm not talking about the kingdom, I'm talking about during the Dark Ages. And then they came back into power. They came back better than ever, so to speak. And then they continued at that point with their powers, right? The French, the British, the Spanish, and then continued to expand and expand and expand from there, to the point where they got to a state where the world was now wandering after the beast. All right, as this new, power structure set up as a blueprint, okay, for the world to follow. And let's go into that word wonder, because that's when you started to have, through this joint reign that formed the beast, you started to have new, economic breakthroughs and certain things that were, it made the world wonder. Okay, militarily as well, right? To wonder, to marvel at, to be had in admiration. And that's what, when you read here, the Treaty of Rome, right, and you read, as it says, that this would promote peace, right, economic prosperity, and an ever closer union through free movements of goods, people, services. This was to change the way the world was used to running under this formation of this beast, and it will cause the world to wonder. Verse 4, it says, and they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? So how then did they worship the dragon? right? Because now if we're in a different time period, and they're now you have the beast coming up again, but in the modern sense as NATO and the EU, how are they worshiping the dragon? Indirectly. Okay, they're worshiping the dragon indirectly. A modern day example is like how um people engage in really ancient pagan practices and rituals today without knowing it. When they when you tell somebody, hey, do you know that really when you're celebrating Christmas, that's a pagan practice, they wouldn't believe it. They wouldn't believe it goes back to Babylonian customs and so on, because you're doing the same thing, but it looks different. Now they got the Christmas carols, you got the Christmas tree, you got the lights, but why is it done that way? Where did that originate from? They don't look into that. So they've wrapped it up. They've taken a pile of hot crap and they've wrapped it up in a gift basket, or in gift wrapped, and they've brought it to you. They took some some hard, dog crap, painted it with yellow paint and called it gold. And people are walking around with it, but it's still crap, man. So they're causing people to worship the beast, which is the ancient Roman way and system, through the modern day coding that they've put on it. All right, and people don't even realize it. So you're really in Rome all over again, but you just call it America, right? You're in the Roman system all over again, but you call it regular life. Their economic system, all of that. It says here, and they worship the beast, saying, "Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" Because of their military might, people were, wondering like how can you even go against, a power like this? Now, as we read through here, there are times when it mentions the beast, and it's in reference to the beast as a whole, that unified structure. But there's sometimes where it zooms in, and it's focusing on one aspect of the beast or like the heart of it, which is why sometimes you'll see we'll talk about America when reading about the beast, and sometimes we'll talk about the whole beast system, because America is still the heart, right? In Revelation 17, she's likened unto the horde that sits upon the beast, but she's still the heart of this system. So verse 5, it says, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And that's what you see, right? You see that proud, energy that they spew forth, speaking blasphemies. We went into that. Now, if they're coming in the power of ancient Rome, why do you think it says that they spoke blasphemies? What did the first beast have on his head? Name of blasphemy. So what is promoted here? An ungodly spirit, okay, and an anti-Messiah lifestyle. Then these are all part of the great things and blasphemies that were spoken. Now they've reached a point that they become proud, thinking that through their technology, they can now challenge God. Saying things like, we don't need the God of the Bible anymore. He's old. He only was able to do and create organic things. We can now create the inorganic. We can now hack. Humans are now hackable creatures. And they're doing this, also going back to 2 Thessalonians, they have that God complex. They want to sit in the seat of God and oppose all that is called God. And power was given unto him to continue 42 months. So who gave him that power? That power that was given unto him was from the Lord. And that 42 months is the period of 350 years. When went into that in Revelation 12 and in Revelation the 11th chapter. And this was mainly power to over Israel, right? Power to put us in captivity or subjection under them, which was that 42 months or that 350-year period of us being in slavery under them. Now, they still have power, but this is specifically emphasizing the time when they had us in that captivity. Verse 16, it says here, or Salakia, verse 6, and he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And that's why today, that's a part of the deception that they went about to deceive. When you go to Revelation 20, it talks about that they were loose for a short season to deceive the nations. So they blasphemed the Lord, one in crossing out his son. Revelation 11 talks about that, where also our Lord was crucified. They paint, their likeness as the heavenly host, as the Most High. Look, if you type in here, God and Adam, this is what you're gonna see. This, you see that? This, two men. One is naked. The other one is in a effeminate pose, with naked babies around him, wrapped around him. They basically trying to paint the Lord as a PDF file, right? Touching fingers with a naked man. So you want to talk about blasphemies, right? This, how they say, let's go into that word. We went into the word blasphemy, right? And it said it was speech injurious to one's name. Well, what do they say? A picture or an image is worth 1,000 words. So what is this saying? If this is how you're depicting the Most High, when you read the Bible, this is not the image that should come to mind. Okay, this is not the power that is feared, amongst all of creation, the God of the universe. But he got this butt naked, blonde headed Edomite baby, or half grown man, adolescent, whatever, wrapped all around him. You got his finger all wrapped around. What's this about? What's that going into? Look at this. Anyway, that's about enough. So you can see here blatant examples of this, and there's many more. Okay, of the blasphemy against God, and plus the things that they promote here, are injurious or ungodly, right? To blaspheme His name and His tabernacle, which is the heavens, and them that dwell in heaven, the angels, Yahushai. They've covered the faces of the judges, and they've deceived the world to believe that is so, like that. Okay, if you type in here, MC angels of God, this is what you're gonna see. Okay, you're not gonna see what they actually look like. They're not gonna show you them as, and where the hell you get a female angel from? This is what they're gonna show you, man. This is what's in heaven, apparently. Now you go up to heaven, and this is how Jacob was wrestling the angel. So Jacob just happened to be naked, wrestling the angel, pulled him up close like that, like you had a woman you're trying to hug up on. Crazy work, man. Absolutely crazy work. Anyway, let's go back, man. This is Revelation chapter 13, verse 7. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints. Who are the saints? The saints are Israelites. So remember how I mentioned here that he was given power to continue 40 and 2 months. They had power in that time to make war against us, to come against us, to the northern kingdom, which were here in the Americas already, right? They made war with them against the Gad, Reuben, and subjected them. And then they came to the parts of Africa where we were, and they made war against us, and then subjected us. And as it says, and overcome them. And that's how we became, basically brought under bondage for that 40 and 2 months. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. Yeah, and that's why they're the ruling power today, because it's their time to rule, right? When you go back to the Nebuchadnezzar's vision, that's that defeat. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. So those who are not written in the book of life of the Lamb are those that are not of the elect. Okay, and they're gonna worship him, right? They're gonna bow down to the beast. They're gonna follow whatever is pushed by this man and by his system, because they don't have the spirit, in them to resist it, because their names are not written in the Lamb's book of life. Verse 9, if any man have an ear, let him hear. That's a spiritual ear, right? Meaning those that have their spirits open to be able to understand and receive. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. So if you look at what we just read here about power to make war with the saints and overcome them, who led who into captivity? We were led into captivity of Esau. And so he must also go into captivity, and not just him, but the rest of the nations. It tells you that in the Apocrypha. Hath not, yeah. In the book of Maccabees. First Maccabees 2 and 10. And I'm gonna actually start up at verse verse 8. And this was after the temple was, completely you know, d- ransacked, brought down. It says, her temple during the reign of the Greeks. Her temple is become as a man without glory. Her glorious vessels are carried away into captivity. Her infants are slain in the streets. Her young men with the sword of the enemy. This is referring to Israel or Jerusalem. What nation hath not had a part in her kingdom and gotten of her spoils? See, because all nations have at one point or another had us under them, under their rule. And so they're also going to go in captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Well, who has done the most killing with the sword? Who, when you go to the book of Revelation, the 6th chapter, what was the description of the red horse? Okay, right here. Revelation 6 and 4, and this is dealing with Esau. And there came out another horse, which was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon, to what? To take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword, and that was his blessing. Okay? So he that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. And he has shed the blood of the saints. Revelation 18 goes into that. So guess what? Their blood is going to be shed too. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. And this is what we have to have faith in the Lord, that he's going to rectify and justify, this situation, the controversy of Zion, right? And this is a part of the things that we wait for, right? The patience for the Lord to avenge. And that's in rejoice thou over her, ye holy apostles, for he hath avenged your, what was that? Is that might be Revelation. Avenge. Yeah, Revelation 18. Rejoice thou over her, thou heaven, or rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. Who? Babylon. And who is Babylon? The whore that sitteth upon the beast. Verse 11, it says, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, which is really the same beast, just coming up in a different time. And he had, because the beast, whether in the past as the pagan Roman Empire, or today as NATO and the EU, spearheaded by America, is still Esau in power. He's just calling himself a different name in a different time period. It says here, and coming up out of the earth, meaning rising up into power. And he had two horns like a lamb. And now this is, like I mentioned before, it's focusing more here on America. Now, it's not exclusive to just America, because when you actually look at that two horns, the two horns are referring to a two-party system. Okay, and that two-party system, once again, we mentioned that this beast got his power from the dragon. When you go back to ancient Rome, they also had a two-party system. Okay, with the plebeians and the patricians, and before they had the emperors, which was like a sole rule, you had two consuls that each had equal power to veto one another. So oftentimes you would have what's called a deadlock, where if one consul, which represented the plebs, and the other, which was for the more on the aristocrat side, if one wanted to pass legislation, for example, that would only benefit one side, the other would veto it, and vice versa. So now you may think that's counterproductive, but the benefit in that for them was that whatever would be allowed to pass on both sides would have to be something that would be beneficial for the entire well-being of Rome or the Roman people. Because then, one side would be, all right, you can't just say this is just for your side or just for my side, right? This is for the whole, for everybody. So basically those would be the kind of legislations that would pass through without being vetoed. But they still had that two-party system. So here, this beast coming up out of the earth, which had two horns like a lamb, which is dealing with America, the two horns are the two-party system. Now, you have today, right? Let's look here. Political parties of America. So yeah, I don't know why this. Whenever I try to pull up an image, it always says does this. But let me see what they have here. You see that? The United States operates under a two-party system dominated by the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. These major parties control the executive and legislative branches, while while third parties like the Libertarian and Green parties have smaller influence. See, so you have other parties, but it's dominated by a two-party system. That is the two horns that are like a lamb, because both the Republicans and the Democrats, whenever they're coming up, like for let's say presidency, if you have a president and he's running on either side, they always present themselves as, like, you would picture a lamb as harmless, and if anything beneficial, right? When you think of a lamb versus a lamb is more beneficial to humans because one, it's harmless to you. Two, you can you can eat it, which is benefiting off of it, or you can use its wool for thread to make, clothes or fabric or whatever you're trying to do. So there was a lot of uses for the lamb, and that's what they try to do. They'll push themselves as being useful to benefit the people, but that's their appearance. And he spake as a dragon. When they actually get up into power, their actions are draconian. Okay, and more so specific in this time, they're more or most draconian than ever. That's what that word dragon is talking about. Let's go into that word dragon here. Dracon. It says a dragon, a name for Satan. Let's see what else they have here. Probably from the alternate form of Dekomai. But the word dragon here is going into more of draconian, right? Not necessarily just a great serpent here, because serpents don't speak. But you know what? What's also spiritual about it is, when you think about the serpent, what did the serpent do? In his speech, he deceived. Which is also one of the traits of this beast today. Okay, but when it says he spake as a dragon, it's talking about his draconian legislations, that they push forth. And you see this here in America, which is primarily what this is talking about. But also, if you look up in Germany, for example, right, they have what's known as the German political parties, right? I think it's what is it, the Christian Democratic Union, the CDU, and they have another one. Let me see. The two parties in Germany. Yeah, the CDU, right, the Christian Democratic Union, and the SPD, Social Democratic Party of Germany. Okay, and then in the UK you have what they have, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. So that they still have that two-party system, even amongst these other countries. But the main one here is with the Democrats and the Republicans here in the US. Okay, verse 12, it says, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him. Going into, once again, that building their system upon the first beast, which is the pagan Roman Empire. Okay, so by reviving that empire through their system that they're building today, okay, that's how they're exercising that power. Because when you look at how Rome was built and how it functioned, it's no different than how the U.S., which is leading this system of NATO and the EU, functions. Because they saw what worked, how they dominated others, and that's what they've done. That's what they've taken, that same model, that same blueprint, and they've modernized it in this time, and they're pushing it forth and ruling through that same blueprint as the first beast, because it's the same beast that's just coming back in a different time. And causeth the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And that was the Edomite rule, right, during the Roman Empire that eventually went down, but then they came back up again. So now they're causing those that dwell here to worship the first beast indirectly through them. Okay. Verse 13, and he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And that's going into their military might, right? Their different kinds of bombs, right? They got, the ICBMs, atomic bombs, Moab, right? Mother of all bombs, as the acronym was attributed to it. And that's like, it's a fire coming down from heaven, from the skies, when they fly over you and they drop that. And then before you know it, your skin is melting off of you. Verse 14, and he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles. Now, keep in mind here, right, that, well, actually, we'll get into it in verse 15, but what's going on here, as John is also describing it, is there is this beast who is now, been revived, right, as this second beast, which is the same first beast coming back again. But now, as it's going to say, let me finish reading the 14th verse. They want to build an image, right, to the beast. So it says here, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles, and these are really false miracles, which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. Those miracles are things that are considered like supernatural. Right? Let's take a look at the word miracles. Semion, a sign, a mark, that by which a person or thing is distinguished from others and is known, an unusual occurrence, right? Transcending the common course of nature. So they have been able to perform these unusual occurrences, right, through their technology. That's how they've been able to perform these so-called miracles. Somebody who loses a leg can now walk with a prosthetic leg. Somebody who is a paraplegic can now, with a brain implant, communicate with you, right? Somebody that lost their ability to hear with hearing aids can now hear again. These are all examples of miracles that they had power to do in the sight of the beast, in the presence of the beast, right? Because these technological advances are really from the nations in that form up this beast, and they deceive those that dwell on the earth by this power, and entice them to say, hey, let's take it a step further, right? Saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast that had the wound by a sword and did live, right? That's going back to the first beast, which had the wound, meaning it went down, it was taken down, all right? The rulership of the Edomites, as the Romans, but it did live, right? It came back into power. But when you go throughout all of history, you have had different nations that have had, different gods and different idols, because that's what an image is. When you go into an image, let's do a word search here of the word image. An image is an idol. Okay. Let's see here. Exodus 20:4, thou shalt not make to thee any graven images. That's talking about idols. In Leviticus 26:1, ye shall make you no idols or graven images. That's a carved image or an idol. Today, when you think of an image, you think of a photograph, right? A photograph is a replica. This right here, this is an image, but it's a picture or an image of something. It's to resemble this guy. It's not actually him. It's an image of him. So when they grave an image, they'll carve out, let's say, a bird or, some human looking figure, and it's not an actual human. It's just an image carved out of this thing or this person. That's why it says, lest ye corrupt yourself and make you a graven image, the similitude, right, or the likeness of any figure, the likeness of male or female, right, to create an image or an idol that looks like something. So all throughout history, the nations have, had different images, but these images that were made were all dead. They didn't live. They were carved. They were wood or stone or gold or silver. But that's what they were. They were idols that were dead. The difference here with this heathen, with this Gentile, with this Edomite, okay, is that the image that they are making to the beast, there's a difference in that this image, when you go into verse 15, it says, and he had power to give life onto the image of the beast. So the likeness of this image was the beast. Who was the beast that this image is after? The pagan Roman Empire. So going back up real quick to verse 14, it says here, continuing saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image, which that image is really now the system that they're pushing. Okay, and it resembles that of the first beast. Okay, and the way you bow to this image now is by being partaker, at least of the agenda that they're pushing, right? To receive its mark, to show your allegiance to this image or to this beast, and to be down with whatever anti-Messiah, ungodly, agenda that they push, as it says in verse 15. So the difference here with this idol, this image, than any other image of the past is they had power to give life onto this image. Okay, that was likened after the beast. That the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast, cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. See the difference here? So now we know like the image is going into the system, but what is different now than the way that because all the other, ancient empires, they had their idols and they had a certain things that came along with that, right? Like, for example, Molech, you had to sacrifice onto him. You had to cause your children to go through the fire. You had to do certain things to show your worshiping of that image, right? Today, they've taken this system, and what you see them doing now is they're not just, implementing, your regular laws and, they're doing that too, right? But that's not the only thing they're trying to do. As they're pushing further to cause humanity to worship this image through the deception, through their miracles, through their technology. Right now, they've shifted gears into this whole AI and so on, which is all playing into their power to give life to the image of the beast. Okay, they're using this modern technology to revive that beast and to basically cause the world to succumb to it. So before you know it, you're now in a system where if you don't have this MARK inside of you, you're X'd out from society. You can't access or live in society. It's like today, if you want to live, you got to have a social security number. You got you got to have an ID. How are you going to go get a job if you don't have an ID or a bank account? How are they going to pay you? How are they going to verify who you are? Whenever you go to get a job, they always ask for certain identification documents, passport, a state ID, something along those lines, a bank account. How are you going to get your check or your money? And if you don't have a job, you can't make money. If you can't make money, how are you going to have a place to stay? So you see, all these things are intertwined. This is a transaction-based world, a transaction-based society. So they're now trying to automate life through technology, through artificial intelligence, through this technology that they're pushing forth. But this isn't a godly life. This is a life that is built upon worshiping the beast. It says here that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So anybody that was not down with the things promoted in the system, you would be basically blocked out of society. And they're going to take it to the extent where they will make it seem as though it's not just that, oh, you're just somebody who wants to live off grid. No, you're a threat. Okay? And you need to actually be either put to death or rounded up and thrown into some camp somewhere, never to see the light of day again. They're going to push that. Okay? And it's going to be harder to escape their eyes as they're now shifting from human labor to artificial intelligence, to where you can't escape. Like, a good example is, if you haven't seen the movie Mercy, go and even just watch the trailer. You'll get an example of how, rigorous and inescapable this technology can become. But that's what they're using. Okay, verse 16, it says, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, which is talking about everybody. And the word causeth, when you go into the Greek here, is poeo, which is, let's go into that. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to receive it, but he's going to cause all. It says here, poeo, to make, to produce, to make ready, or to prepare. So right now they're preparing, or they've really prepared the world And it's just a matter of time before whatever, that powder keg is triggers the push of this mark that we're about to read of upon everybody, which is mainly the known world, right? The people that are going to be greatly affected by this all over, because that's what they're doing, right? They're first making the whole world more technologically advanced. They're trying to introduce, this interconnected system everywhere, so that way it's easier to cause all, right, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive this mark. And physically, the mark is the RFID microchip. That's what that actual mark of the beast is. It's a physical device that they will, bring out. And the temptation is, are you going to receive it or not? Okay. And when you receive it, what that means is you're pledging your elite. That's like you bowing down to the idol, right? To the image, saying, okay, I'm down. I'm this mark that I have, which allows me to interact in society, is every time I use it, I'm showing you that I've pledged allegiance to the system. I'm a part of this system. I'm a part of the followers or the worshipers of this beast, of this idol, of this image. And let's go into that word mark. In the Greek here, it's charagma, right? Or charagma, which here says a stamp or imprinted mark, a mark branded upon horses, a mark stamped on the forehead or the right hand as the badge of the followers of the anti-Messiah, which is not only one anti-Messiah, it's multiple anti-Messiahs. Okay, but you can see here it says a scratch or etching. This charagma is dealing with an incision. Okay, it's something that they're going to insert subdermally under your skin. So it's not something that's just stamped, because when you look at even a branding is not surface level, or else you could just wash it off. A thing carved or graven is etched beyond the surface. So you're in this case you're going subdermal. Now let's look at that root word for charagma is charax, right? A pale or stake or palisade. And this is the tool, what is going to be used to create that etching. If somebody wanted to carve something into a tree, they would need like a knife or something very sharp and rigid to be able to cut beyond the bark and make that etching. Okay, so likewise, this here, it would be like a pail or a stake that you would use to cut beneath the surface. Even if you're just like stamping it into the ground, you're going beyond the surface. And the modern day Carax is going to be the needle that they use in order to to pierce past your skin to create that incision and then push that device in there. Let's see. I want to see if they have an actual. Oh, okay, there you go. Perfect. If this will load without crashing. So this is the Carax. Okay, the act of this cutting in that skin is the incision, the making of the incision, or the charagma. And the thing that they're going to put in there is the MARK. Okay, the MARK is what they're actually going to put by this thing into your body. That's the new direction things are going in, subdermal technology. And it says here, right, the root word now of Carax is, I believe this is grapho. Yeah, grapho, which here says to write with reference to the form of letters, right? To write with reference to the contents of writing, and it's basically information, right? It says here to write to one, i.e., by writing, to give information, directions. Okay, so that's information. Now, the way this device actually works on a realistic level, this little thing right here is filled with billions of transistors, right? Tiny, 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 gates and electrical, circuits that actually run. Okay, so when you scan it, it whatever is scanning it sends, a signal, radio waves, which then hit this device. Then the device responds back with some radio waves. That's why it's called RFID, radio frequency identification. So if somebody has this inside of their body and they go to say pay for something, they just like today you have contactless payment. You use your phone to tap the um the pin pad thing, and then it just like extracts, like how you have like Apple Pay or something. Soon is gonna be this. Okay, and this is that MARK. So whether they want any information, because how is it that you pay when you have your phone, right? And then you tap it on the device. You have to have a card that's configured into your digital wallet on your phone, and that card has information about your bank account. So when it's scanning, it's really sending a signal, and it's checking some database somewhere to see, okay, does this person actually have money? Is this actually their account? And then if it does and everything is good, it goes through. It causes the transaction to go through. So this device is going to play that role. It's going to send the grapho or the information needed back to the register or whatever is scanning it. Maybe it could even be a phone, to give it, whether it's your ID or credentials for whatever it's trying to get the go ahead to do. Okay, and this is what that looks like. Okay, this is it. This is Revelation 13 and 16. This is what they're trying to cause everybody to receive. So going back to Revelation 13 and 16, it says here in their right hand or in their foreheads. Now, when it comes to the foreheads, and when it says right hand, it's really referring, it can be any part of your body. All right, but the right hand is, most people are right hand dominant. Okay, and so when John saw this, most people, he saw the common folk would receive it in their actual hand. That's the conventional place. But you also have people that receive it in their foreheads. It's not talking about your forehead as in this bare skin. You can't fit anything here. It's referring into your brain. These are called brain implants. And when they scan it, they would scan your actual forehead, because they're not going to scan the top of your head. The clearest path from outside of your body into wherever you got this brain in, wherever you got this implant in, is where they're going to scan from. Some people might have, they might cut some hair off the side, and maybe they've implanted it through there. they might scan through there, but the forehead is referring to the brain implants, and the hand is referring to the regular, implants. And mainly the brain implants would probably be for like people that have, some that are like have the Neuralink, some that are paraplegic, or some that have some defect that this is supposed to fix. But for the most part, the main thing is going to be to allow you to function in this transaction-based society. That is the power in this MARK. So they're going to cause, this beast is going to cause everybody to try and receive this. It says here, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark. So if you don't have this mark, you can't buy or sell. Now, okay, that might not mean anything if you were not living in a transaction-based society, but you try something, right? You try clearing out your bank account and try to live for 2 months or 1 month or 3 weeks or 2 weeks. You try living for 2 weeks without any money and see how you're going to function. You're going to realize very quickly how everything in your life is transaction based. Even things you don't think about. Okay? When you go to charge your phone, you're using electricity. If you don't pay your electric, whoever, Con Edison or whoever you're paying, you're not getting electricity. So now you can forget about all your technological devices. Now, even if you had electricity, you're not paying Verizon or whoever you're using, you're not getting internet. And if you don't have internet, forget about it. You want to go from point A to point B? If you have a car, okay, that's cool. What happens when you run out of gas? You need to buy gas, right? You need to get your oil changed. If you're trying to go from point A to point B and you don't know where it's at, you need to use a GPS. The GPS requires internet, right? And wherever you're trying to go, more often than none, you're gonna need to make some transaction over there. Okay? If you go somewhere and there's no parking, you got to pay for parking. That's money. Everything in this society runs on money. It's a transaction-based society. That's why the rich have power, because more doors are open for them, because everything is transaction-based. The more transactions you can make, the more power you have. The fact that you need to pay bills just to survive tells you that your lifeline is based on the transactions you make. So if they tell you that if you don't have this MARK, you cannot buy or sell, they're basically telling you can't live in this society. It says here, or the name of the beast or the number of his name. And the name of the beast or the number of his name are the associations with the beast, which really comes through taking his mark. Okay, because if you look at it, the name or the beast or the number, if you go to a store, they're not going to say, yo, what's the number of the beast? you got 20 items in your cart. They're scanning it in at the register, and then you get there and they say, well, nope, you just got to type in the number of the beast and then the transaction will go through. That's not how it works. Okay, the name and the number is the things that are associated with this beast, but you got to take the mark before you can actually buy or sell or be a part of society for that matter. Verse 18, it says, here is wisdom, let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666, and that's 666. Okay. And so, that's pretty much the end of Revelation, the 13th chapter, right? As it goes into, the beast, the formation of the beast, the first beast, the next beast, the modern day beast that rose up after the likeness of the first beast. But when you look at it, the symbolism behind it, ultimately in the eyes of the Lord, in our time, we look at it, you look at it technology based, right? Because that's how it's playing out in your real life, right? They're building out a digital infrastructure, they're setting, these different things up. But when you look at what's actually happening from a spiritual lens, they're making an idol, just like Nebuchadnezzar had made an idol, going back to, the Babylonian Empire with the three holy children. So they're making an idol and they're telling everybody, that's the image. They're telling everybody, hey, come and worship this idol, come and bow down to this image. And in order to show that you're truly in allegiance or to this image, you have to take this mark to brand you as a follower of this beast. And what happened in the ancient world when we worshiped idols? We went astray from the Lord. And those that worshiped idols, that bowed down to image, that served images, broke the law. Because it's in the law you're not supposed. What's that? The first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. So that brings us to the end of the book of Revelation, the 13th chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakah Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.